Welcome to today's GNCC Roundtable with our distinguished guest, the Honourable Mona Fortier, Associate Finance Minister and Minister of Middle Class Prosperity, taking a deeper look at the 2021 federal budget. Minister Fortier, thank you so very much for being with us this morning. And it is also a privilege to be joined by Vance Badawey, Member of Parliament for Niagara Centre, and Chris Bittle, Member of Parliament for St. Catharines and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Truly appreciate you both being with us, as well as our thanks to all the participants who have chosen to join us on a Monday morning. My name is Mishka, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. It is important for us to come together for conversations on key issues during these historic times, especially when it comes to the 2021 federal budget and future priorities. What will a successful recovery look like? How's the federal government balancing economic and social concerns? And what is the role of the private sector to ensure future resilience? Dialogues such as this one are made possible due to the partnerships that support them. And our appreciation goes to Nordstrom Biotech for all that you do and for Niagara, but also internationally for the biotech sector. Just to give you a quick overview of today's format, following some introductory remarks, we will have our Q&A session, at which time you can use either the raise a hand function or the chat function to ask any questions and have a dialogue directly with the minister. And on that note, here is a message from Nordstrom Biotech.
This is Norgen Biotech. We are a biotechnology manufacturing company based in Thorold, Ontario, Canada. This has been a busy year for us, with plans in motion to expand our facility, as well as producing testing kits for COVID-19. The people of Norgen have been working hard to serve their community. Now let's go see what the people of Norgen are up to. Hey Pam, do you mind telling us what you do here at Norgen?
Hi, sure. So I'm the Quality Assurance and Regulatory Manager at Norgen. So I oversee our ISO certifications, our quality management system, as well as work on regulatory submissions for our products with Health Canada, FDA, CEIVD as well.
Let's go to the lab to talk to our scientists.
I'm a research scientist, and I'm going to isolate the RNA from all the samples that we received to be sent for sequencing.
I am a researcher on our NGS team, and my job is to take the RNA that we isolate in the lab, put it on the sequencer, and then send it upstairs for analysis.
Let's head up to bioinformatics then, shall we?
I'm a bioinformatician here, and we analyze all the sequencing data based on customer needs.
This is only a portion of the work being done at Norgen. While each of these departments is essential to our success, we're thankful for our team in manufacturing for making our work possible. Although we make hundreds of kits, we'd like to focus your attention on what we are currently working on, which is our saliva collection device, as well as what we are doing to facilitate COVID-19 testing.
COVID-19 detection all starts with the sample. The sample can be collected through saliva or swab, is preserved and shipped to our lab. Once it's received by our lab, we isolate it using our silicon carbide technology. The samples then undergo PCR testing for the detection of COVID-19, which can be further analyzed by our NGS team.
The Ontario government was very instrumental during this pandemic, and they supported businesses across the province. We also get support for developing our novel saliva collection and preservation device.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Ugolini, and I am the International Sales Manager here at Nordstrom Biotech. Vance Badawey is a former longtime regional councillor and mayor turned federal member of parliament for Niagara Centre. He is the chair of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities and the co-chair of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Task Force. He is also the vice chair of the Canada-United States Interparliamentary Group, where Vance focuses on the Great Lakes and works to protect the economic, environmental, and social aspects of this important resource. Vance is also a member of the House of Commons Liaison Committee and a member of the Senate House Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations. Please join me in welcoming Vance Badawey.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the GNCC for hosting this event. It's wonderful to see all of you. And again, welcome to everyone on the call. And I, as well as all of Chris and the minister, are very excited to be here today with you to take part in this discussion about our government's budget aiming at lifting Canadians up from the devastation so many have experienced during and throughout this pandemic, and especially to talk about our initiatives to build more affordable housing, a plan that will also create thousands of new jobs in the process. First elected in a by-election in 2017, the Honourable Mona Fortier is the first female member of Parliament for Ottawa-Vanier and is currently the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and Associate Minister of Finance, and especially busy throughout this past week, as you can well imagine. Prior to being elected, Minister Fortier worked as the Chief Director of Communications and Market Development at College La Cité and managed her own communications firm. She also served on several nonprofit boards of directors, including the Montfort Hospital, the Ontario Provincial Advisory Committee on Francophone Affairs, and the Shaw Centre. In addition, she has received numerous awards for her community involvement, including the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012. As a mother of three and University of Ottawa graduate, community leader, and entrepreneur, Minister Fortier knows that it is important to come together with an ambitious plan to build stronger and better communities while growing the middle class. I'm sure everyone on the call today joins me in welcoming Minister Fortier for joining us here in Niagara today. Minister, welcome. It's great to have you out.
Bon matin. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mishka and Vance, for the incredibly warm welcome. And thank you, Chris, for being here as well. It is great to be able to speak to you at the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, virtually, of course. Hopefully, I can come and visit you soon. Alors, ça me fait vraiment un grand plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. And I do want to give both Vance and Chris a shout out before I dive into the budget. They are both some of the hardest working members of Parliament, tirelessly advocating for the needs of the community here in Greater Niagara region. As we mentioned, Vance's portfolio is full. He has very long days. And as the chair of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, I know that that is something that is very dear to his heart. Also, Chris, as you heard, was appointed recently as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And you know that both put a lot of effort into gathering feedback and recommendations for this budget. So thank you both for finding the time to be here today. And to continue, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from my home in Ottawa-Vanier, which is on Algonquin and Anishinaabe traditional territory. This is it. So as you saw last Monday, our government announced Budget 2021. And for those of you who haven't been able to read through the 700 pages and more, I am very happy to brief you all today on this plan for growth and resilience. And trust me, we have a lot to talk about. This budget is an ambitious plan that focuses on two main pieces. Number one, finishing the fight against COVID. Number two, laying the groundwork for a strong economic recovery. Now, let me start with the former. As you know, from the beginning, we have made it clear that our first priority is to fight the pandemic and save lives. The largest immunization campaign in our nation's history is now underway. And by the end of September, every Canadian who wants one will have access to a vaccine. The budget includes an additional $1 billion to help speed up immunization and another $4 billion of our healthcare systems. I know how important this investment will be for Ontario as we fight this current surging third wave. We need vaccines and we need them now. And as of late last week, our government had delivered over 5.2 million vaccine doses to Ontario, of which about 160,000 have come directly to the Niagara region. This is very important work and must continue to keep people safe and protected from the virus. While we focus on the health of our people, we are also focusing on the health of our business community, in particular, small businesses. Through this plan, we will make targeted investments so businesses can hire and train Canadian workers with a focus on getting more people in the economy in a fair and inclusive way. over 500,000 people will benefit from these initiatives. For example, small businesses, especially those here in Greater Niagara, will appreciate our commitment to invest $4 billion to support 160,000 small and medium businesses to enter the digital economy. And that's not just to bring retail stores online, although it's part of it. This funding will also help businesses automate with artificial intelligence, protect their intellectual property, and become more competitive in the labor market. Now, for businesses that have been hit hardest by the pandemic, you know who they are, our beloved restaurants, tourism operators, arts and culture. Hiring the workers they need to grow is a cost they may worry about taking on. This is why the wage subsidy has been so critical. It has helped more than 5.3 million Canadians keep their jobs, and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy and lockdown support have helped more than 154,000 organizations with rent, mortgage, and other expenses. And we will continue to be there for businesses for as long as they need, and we have extended these supports until the end of September. We will also introduce the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program for eligible employers that continue to experience qualifying declines in revenues relative before the pandemic. The subsidy would offset a portion of the extra costs employers take on as they reopen, either by increasing wages or hours worked or by hiring more staff. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for businesses to hire new workers as the economy reopens. Mais comme vous le savez, les femmes ont été très touchées par cette pandémie et leurs emplois continuent de se rétablir plus lentement. Aujourd'hui, plus de 16 000 femmes sont complètement quittées le marché du travail, tandis que 91 000 hommes l'ont réintégré. C'est un problème et c'est une récession au féminin. We are in a she session. And one of the big solutions to that challenge is childcare. COVID has made it clear that childcare is not only a social issue, but also an urgent economic issue. School and childcare closures have been difficult for parents. Without access to childcare, parents, usually mothers, cannot fully participate at work. Some have had to leave their jobs or reduce their hours significantly. The Canada-wide early learning and childcare is the national economic policy we need now. The benefits are threefold. It provides jobs for workers, the majority of whom are women. It enables parents to reach their full economic potential, and it creates a generation of engaged and well-prepared young learners. And as someone who literally had to start their own daycare in my basement because I had no other options as an entrepreneur and small business owner, I can tell you how transformative this will be for so many people. Here are the details. Budget 2021 commits up to $30 billion over 5 years to build a high quality, affordable, and accessible early learning and childcare system across Canada. Our short-term goal is to cut the cost of childcare by 50% by the end of next year and reach a $10 per day childcare system by the end of 2026. This investment will work to grow our economy by as much as 1.2% of GDP and increase the size of our workforce with an additional 240,000 workers. En fait, j'ai visité virtuellement Windsor la semaine dernière et j'ai entendu la communauté locale dire à quel point ce programme sera transformateur, non seulement pour les familles, mais aussi pour l'économie dans son ensemble. For example, when I was in Windsor last week, Shelley Fellows from Automate Canada said that we are offering a solution to bring down a substantial barrier to women in the manufacturing sectors. And she said that as our economy opens back up, manufacturing will ramp up as well. And Automate Canada will be hiring. And it is amazing to think that now the hiring pool has just doubled in size. The pandemic has also widened gaps in Canadians' access to housing. High housing costs, especially in urban centers, continue to place middle class and low income Canadians under huge financial pressure. A long-term plan for a faster growing Canadian economy must include housing that is affordable for working Canadians, especially young families. That's why the budget has planned to invest $2.5 billion and reallocate $1.3 billion in existing funding to speed up the construction, repair, or support for 35,000 affordable housing units. And as you can tell, this is a highly ambitious budget that is designed to help as many people as we possibly can stay healthy, safe, and employed. Christia and I approached this historic opportunity with a focus on benefiting as many people as possible while they navigate this tricky time and come back way better on the other side. Il y a littéralement des centaines d'autres mesures dont je pourrais vous parler et je pourrais souligner, mais je suis impatiente de répondre à vos questions et d'avoir une conversation avec vous ce matin. So to make sure we have some time to have this conversation, because I'm looking forward to answering your question, I will conclude by saying that last Monday was a demonstration that our government will continue to stand together with Canadians during this challenging time. And we have your back. Thank you. Merci. Over to you for the question and answer period.
Thank you so very much, Minister Fortier. We really appreciate it. I'm encouraging everyone who's participating today to utilize the chat function or raise the hand function to ask a question directly. I see it here on my end, and we're really committed to getting to most everyone's comments that are there. But first of all, Minister Fortier, let me thank you for your support of the small and medium-sized enterprises, especially when it comes to wage subsidies, rent subsidies that are there, for extending them beyond that, having them tail off after that. They have been two of the programs that have been identified over and over again by businesses across Niagara of making a significant difference that you have made with that. And especially also your, in addition, your hiring program and the incentives that you've put forward to the digitalization of businesses that are there has been instrumental. I'm going to jump into one, and it's a historic announcement that you have made, and you have mentioned it, and that's the childcare. And I thought, why not start out with that, as we then can move into some of the other and specific Niagara-specific questions that have also been already shared with us. We are, for the first time, we have two women leading the Department of Finance. I know that you and Deputy Prime Minister Freeland have been working hard to bring feminist and gender inclusive lenses to this budget, including your commitment to the investment in affordable early learning and childcare systems in this country. You've mentioned a little bit on this note, but one of the areas that we have often looked at is saying, how do we ensure that it comes about? It's not the first time in our history, in Canada's history, that this topic has been raised, but we have not been always successful. Quebec has a very successful system. What do we need from Ontario? What do we need from Niagara to ensure that this is going to move forward in the next year and in the years to come?
Well, that's the biggest challenge now. It's nice to be, presenting a $30 billion investment with objectives, but now we need to implement. And you're right, Mishka, we will have to work closely with the government of Ontario, but also closely with communities like yours in Niagara to make sure that you pressure us on getting the job done. I believe, and I've heard, and I'm sure Chris and Vance heard it also when they did their pre-budget consultations, that this was the time to bring forward an early learning and childcare to make sure that not only our social, but our economic growth is possible. And I will tell you, during pre-budget consultations across the nation, industries, chambers of commerce, small businesses said we need women to participate more and to make sure they get back on the job. And we know that many women were most affected during this pandemic for different reasons. And this is one of them. Let's make sure we have a early learning and child care system that will support our economic growth. And that, as I said, it will create jobs, 240,000 jobs. It will also increase the economy by 1.2% of GDP. So we have a program, we have a plan. Now we need to implement it, and we will have to work closely with the government of Ontario and your communities to make sure that it happens. And I can tell you already, we got signals from other provinces. So that also, I believe, will be helpful in making sure that we bring that forward.
Yeah, I think.
And again, Mishka, maybe Chris or Vance want to share what they had heard and how important it is. I know they can also contribute to this conversation if they want to.
On that note, let me see if Chris or Vance, and Chris, I think would like to.
That's a very dangerous thing that Mona knows. Certain things you never have to ask a politician. Can I take your picture and would you like to say a few words? But I'll be very brief and just build on what Mona says. And this is something that I've been hearing about for 5 years since we got elected. And COVID has shown all of the issues in our society, and lack of access to proper childcare has only exacerbated the economic crisis. And so this is fundamental if we're going to build back and have a inclusive society and a economically equitable society, that this is going to be absolutely fundamental to that. So I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Chris. This has been mirrored also by the comments we received from the business community and the community at large, is the importance of it. Within our chamber, we have a number of advisory councils. One of the advisory councils is our WIN Council, the Women in Niagara, who've worked closely with other gender equity associations, including the Gender Equity Task Force of Niagara and others. And the topic is, it's not just a topic, it is something that we have to actualize as we move forward, and it will benefit all. And it's been interesting to see how it has moved from being more of a social issue into actually now being an economic one. And that is reflected in other nations across the world as well. So anything that we can do or need to do and that you can advise us on, I think would be greatly appreciated. There are some questions that are coming in, and one that has also been actually pre-submitted to us too, and that is wondering if you could speak a little bit more on your commitment to climate change, because I think in many ways when we look at this COVID-19 crisis that we're in, often there have been comparisons made and drawn to the environmental risks that we're also maybe not taking as seriously, or scientists we might not listen to today, and that may be issues that we need to address as well. And I was wondering if you can also speak to that in relation to what is in the budget as we're moving forward.
Well, that's a really important question. I mean, the first thing we need to know is that this is a budget that is based on bringing forward the economy and the environment together. I know Chris probably knows all of these measures by heart by now, but and Vance too. We are investing into green transition. We want to make sure that we bring our jobs and we grow our economy to not only fight climate change, but create new opportunities for our country and make sure that we protect our environment. Over $17 billion to fund our action climate plan that the Prime Minister announced last December. And there are many measures in there that will help us create very good jobs. And I'm sure that in the Niagara region, you will benefit from these investments, as much for small business, as much for families. Everybody will be able to participate into that green transition. And I really am looking forward to making sure that we also, as the Prime Minister announced last week, set our targets to bring down the emissions by 2050. We have set very clear targets and we all need to work together to get there. And I'm sure Chris or Vance will want to chime in there too.
Well, maybe I'll go quickly, and Vance, you can take. I'll then shut up for the rest of the event. But No, this was a big week, and kind of almost lost in the week was our announcement that we're going to increase our targets. We already had an ambitious plan to exceed our Paris climate change targets. To use the language of the existing crisis, we flattened the curve on pollution in terms of the most recent reports that have come out. Carbon pollution is heading in the way we want to, which is down. And we have a target to get to our Paris commitments, but now we've increased that. Our Paris commitments were 30% below 2005 emissions. We're now going up to 40 to 45%. We've committed, I know Mona talked about the $17 billion in this budget, but overall it's approximately $100 billion to fighting climate change. And this is an existential threat to Canada and to the world. And so this crisis will end. Patty Hajdu, the Minister of Health, likes to tell me that she has conversations with Dr. Tam, and she asked Dr. Tam, when will the pandemic end? And Dr. Tam says, pandemics always end, just not today. And so this crisis will end, not today, but there's going to be, the federal government's going to be there, and we are taking significant action on climate change.
Thank
If
you.
I can just add to that, and I think a lot of folks that are on the call are asking the question, so what does that mean for Niagara? And how does it attach some of the announcements that we've been making to Niagara? Well, listen, folks, we got the Great Lakes here. We got the Great Lakes, we have the St. Lawrence, and of course, climate change has drastically affected the condition of the Great Lakes. And I'll use the words that I use often with respect to triple bottom line. It's affected the environmental aspects of the Great Lakes, the social, cultural aspects of the Great Lakes, as well as the economic aspects of the Great Lakes. And when we look at infrastructure, we have to recognize that although infrastructure sounds like a hard, cold word, because usually it's attached to municipalities, usually it's attached to water pipes and sewer pipes and recreation centers and sidewalks and roads, etc. But I think when you attach the infrastructure investments that we're making to climate change, and you look beyond the norm or the traditional investments that we've made in the past, now going into those areas like the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, it attaches itself well to the Niagara region. When we look at the municipal and private sector investments that we're making, niche to Niagara, when it comes to the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence, the marine industry, and of course with that, our trade corridor, our multimodal assets, a lot of the investments that we're making are very specific to Niagara. So when you look at the budget and you look at the broader view of the budget, especially with respect to climate change, you can really draw it down to how it affects Niagara and some of the investments that we're making here locally, which again attach to the economic benefits, but also the environmental and the cultural benefits that we have here throughout the region.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both of your comments, Chris and Vance. I want to touch base on one that actually has been submitted to us, and not just one individual, but a number of them have brought this forward. And it's wonderful on one side to see the historic investments that are there, made in childcare, climate change, environment, and others, key factors that I think people essentially are very much committed to. But there's a fear that it will eventually raise our cost of living for Canadians. It is a fear that our debt is actually going to be significantly too high, and that we're leaving that for our future generations actually to pay for. Minister Fortier, any comments from your end on that thought that so many businesses have? Businesses are forced to balance sheets and financials each and every year. This is sometimes scary looking at the direction and the debt that our national debt is going to.
Well, it's not just a thought. It is what people are talking about. And it's important to share the message that why we can, and here's why we're investing. Now, first, this is a budget that invests in growth. And the best way to pay our debt is to grow our economy. And we are growing our human capital and our physical capital. These are investments in our future, and they will yield great dividends. Now, second, because our decision last year to support Canadians is already paying off. Decisive government action prevented economic scarring in our businesses and households, and it allowed the Canadian economy to begin rebounding from the COVID recession, even before we have finished our fight against the virus. And third, because our government has a plan, and we keep our promises. And this is an ambitious budget, but we can afford it. And the investments we are proposing are responsible and sustainable. And I have to tell you that Christia had that question asked to her, of course, by media all week. And I just want to put in also an important message that we are sharing is that we are prudent and we are responsible. We're bringing forward a fiscal anchor, a new one that is committed to reduce the federal debt as a share of the economy over the medium term. And we also unwinding our COVID-related deficits. And this fiscal anchor will continue to protect Canada's low debt advantage, and so that our borrowing costs remain low and future generations are not burdened with COVID-19 related debt. Now, again, this framework is prudent, it's responsible, and it's even sustainable, with the federal debt to GDP ratio expected to fall to 49.2% by 2026, and the deficit to reach 1.1% of GDP that same year. So we have a plan and we will follow it. And I am convinced that we'll be able to grow our economy.
Thank you very much. On that note, I see a couple of chats and comments coming in that are industry specific, and I thought it's valuable for us because Niagara is defined by tourism, is defined by our border and cross-border by the wine industry and other areas of it, that we maybe touch on some of them. So we're today joined by Del Rollo with Atera, and he has comments. So thank you for your support of the Canadian wine industry in the budget. He's specifically interested in the interprovincial trade comments to the budget, and if you can expand on that. With online sales of wine becoming really important, do you feel that you will be able to work on convincing the provinces to open up their borders to direct-to-consumer sales of Canadian wine across Canada? And I know that you had about a year or 2 years ago, I believe, have already kind of really opened it up for the provinces to move forward on this one. And I know that you made a commitment in this budget on interprovincial trade as well. If you can speak to that.
Well, thank you for that in question. And I know that Chris and Vance will be able to also chime in here. In budget 2019, the federal government removed all federal restrictions on the interprovincial trade of liquor. And federal government remains steadfast in its efforts to remove internal trade barriers and continues to work closely with provincial, territorial, and industry partners to accelerate action on this front. So you'll see that in budget 2021, it includes 21 million over 3 years to continue to reduce trade barriers across the country. So that is something we are committed to and will continue to do so. You will also see that we have invested measures. You mentioned tourism operators were really affected. Yes, completely. That's why we're investing $500 million additional to the federal economic agencies to help and support tourism operators across the country. And I'm sure that you'll be able to benefit from that fund. We also are investing into making sure that you saw the wine, the support for jobs in the Canadian wine sector. We heard you loud and clear. I know that Vance and Chris pressed us hard to make sure we move forward with this. We wanted to also focus on making sure local communities were able to be stronger. So this is the commitment that we have, and I'm sure there's probably other more specific investments that you'll be benefiting and that maybe Vance and Chris might add at this time.
You know what, before we be passing it on to you, Vance, there's also a question because it's specifically related to this, and this is coming from Debbie Zimmerman, who everyone on this call knows, so from the Ontario grape growers. And she's asking and saying, like, we look forward to building an excise replacement program beyond the 2-year commitment that grows our domestic industry. And the domestic industry is critical to Niagara and to grape growers and as well to wineries and small wineries especially. Can we count on your support? And maybe this time, Vance, I think you were likely going to speak to that. Over to you.
Well, three things. To directly answer Debbie's question, the answer is yes. We've been working with the grape growers as well as the wine industry for the past few years, especially on the replacement program for the excise, and we're almost there. And I say almost, and I'll deal with that latter issue before I go to the original one, is we've committed $101 million in our 2021 budget to, in fact, do that. But I think what's imperative now that that placeholder is there is to get both the grape growers and those within the wine sector together at the table so that we can actually come up with a replacement program that's well sustainable past the 2 years. To the original point, I think Mona touched on it and made it very clear that the federal government and the federal issues attached to cross-border trade when it comes to our provinces have been lifted at the federal level. And bottom line, those issues that now rest upon the shoulders of the provinces. And we will encourage them to make some movement on this so that therefore we can advance that trade within the country domestically.
I appreciate that comment. Minister Fortier, we're a border community here with the United States, a border that has been closed for 14 months, I believe now. And when you build your budget, what is your expectation on when this border will be opened? I know it's opened to trade, but as a tourism community, we depend on travelers coming to Canada and especially the US traveler. And the stress that the accommodation and food sector has felt here in Niagara, an industry we so heavily rely on, has been extraordinary and difficult to watch, actually, and even more difficult to experience for that sector. In building your budget, what is the expectation that you have of that border to open up for that economy to ignite?
Well, I know this is a very difficult time, especially for your community, as those pressures are continuous since last year. I was in Windsor last week, and the same pressures I heard from the community. When we build this budget, the first premise, and I think is very important, is the fact that we need to fight this virus. So the health and safety of Canadians. And it makes it that we have to strengthen our borders and make sure that we fight the virus. And again, we're monitoring as closely as we can by listening to scientists and experts to make the recommendations of when we can move forward and reopen our borders. And at this time, until the fight for COVID is not done, we can't, I don't have a crystal ball knowing when that will happen, but we are monitoring it very closely. And I'm hopeful that I'll be able to tell you first, Mishka, when that decision of reopening the borders will be done.
Yeah. And we actually are, and all business are, that we only want to do it when our health guidelines and medical officer actually approve that it can be done. I think that commitment you have from the business community and that commitment you have from individuals as well.
And I might add here, Mishka, what's important also, what the government has done, the way it's working since last year, when we started this whole thing of COVID, we brought forward measures, emergency measures to support families, workers, businesses, and we adapted them as we went forward. Like wage subsidy, for example. I remember when we proposed the idea of 10% support for businesses. I think we heard loud and clear at that time it wasn't the right measure, and I'm sure all of the chambers and the small businesses telling us this is not going to work made us understand that we needed to change our approach, and that's when we brought forward the 75% with a threshold of 30% revenue loss. Now, we understood around June, July that that was not good enough. That 30% needed to be scalable, and we listened to businesses and we adapted again. And that's why we have, I believe, a wage subsidy support program that is helping so many Canadians be able to be paid. So we will continue to adapt. And that's why it's so important that we listen to our scientists and our experts and we fight this current third wave so we can, of course, recover and start very soon, I hope, be able to be in a more normal life, let's say.
I appreciate that. Chris, you have your hand raised.
I was trying to be very polite, and I'll be very quick. Mona has to be a little bit more diplomatic than I can be. But if we're looking at, in terms of especially lifting measures, there's going to be 50 million doses of vaccine into this country by the end of June. There are 30 million adults who can access the vaccine. So we can do the math on that. And we can look at Britain, that's ahead of us. We're third in the G20, but we can look at the United States and we can look at Britain, who are ahead of us, and we can see that restrictions can be lessened. So I'm usually not an optimistic person as a lawyer by training, but it looks positive based on what I'm seeing abroad and our vaccine strategy, which seems to be working very well. Thank you.
I think you're speaking to a really good point, Chris, and that's the importance. I think that the vaccine and the speed of the vaccine rollout actually gives individuals hope, gives businesses hope. It gives them a sense of that there is going to be a change and that the whole environment is, I'm not sure of what normal looks like down the road. It's likely significantly different than what we see right now, but nevertheless, that it will open up opportunities that we haven't had for the last 14 months. And on that note, we've gotten a couple of inquiries, and they have to do with affordable housing. So we were really glad to see in your budget that you've allocated funding to construct or repair over 50,000 additional units of affordable housing through various programs. And Minister Fortier, I can't stress enough how important this is. But a recent study from Brock University indicates that Niagara alone will need 20,000 units by the end of the decade, just on that end of it. Are there any additional measures the government might take to bring affordable housing supply closer to the level of demands that are there? And I don't think Niagara is unique in that case. I think it's something that many communities across actually Canada are experiencing. And if I could ask you to elaborate on that, that would be appreciated.
Well, thank you, Mishka. And I know the pressures that you are having. I'm having them here too in Ottawa, across the nation. We understood when we launched the National Housing Strategy that we had to really focus on affordable housing. And we've been working on this for 4 years now. Now, one specific measure that I'd like to share that we are repeating, actually increasing the fund, is for the rapid housing. Last year, we brought forward $1 billion, and our target at the time was to have 3,500 units across the nation to help and make sure that we had those units available. We overperformed. 4,700 units were identified or will be built by the end of this year for $1 billion. And when we saw that, and we knew that other communities, and if I'm not mistaken, some of the projects in Niagara weren't the ones identified because we didn't have enough funding left for the $1 billion. We decided, let's do the experience again, and we invested $1.5 billion for the next tranche of the rapid housing, with an objective of 4,500 units across the nation, which I have a feeling we will overperform, but we'll see how that happens. And that is a commitment that we brought forward, and we'll be able to, get there quicker with that specific project, because it works. And I'm sure that some of your shovel-ready projects will be part, hopefully, of the next tranche.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think I speak not only for Niagara, but communities across Niagara, that support for affordable housing is critical at this time and in the next decade moving forward too. This is a question and comment that has come forward by Melinda Chatron, and indicating that the government announced continued support for infrastructure resources for education in the Francophone system. how will you work with the Ontario province to ensure that these funds transfer into their French school board systems in Ontario that see continued enrollment increase? So they're specifically asking what is being done in support of the French education system.
Well, first of all, it's great to see that Melinda is on the line. Bonjour, Melinda. Yes, the government committed to increase infrastructure money for school and education and community infrastructure. And we are going to be working with the communities across the nation to make sure that that investment goes directly in our communities. And we're starting already the conversations with the province of Ontario to make sure that there's a fair investment in those projects. About 2 years ago, we increased the official languages fund of $500,000 and $500 million, sorry. And part of it was also infrastructure money for community and education projects. So that is an additional 81 million in that fund that we will be able to support communities across the country. And I'm looking forward to working, of course, with Melinda to get that in Niagara.
Thank you very much. And this is a question by Colleen Fleming, and she said, how can we better women's opportunities for better paying careers and organizational cultures that support women? Colleen's own company actually does work directly with a lot of nonprofit sectors in the strategic advisory role and in governance role. But I think beyond that, how can we ensure that there's a greater gender equity around the table and in positions that are there?
Well, thank you for that question. And, for far too long, the work women do, paid and unpaid, has been systematically devalued by our economy and by our society. And in last March, Christia and I announced the Task Force on Women in the Economy to help guide a robust, inclusive, and feminist recovery and to help address long-standing systemic barriers. And we are meeting regularly to continue our collaboration for a more inclusive economy. We are investing in trades and reskilling that will help more than 500,000 people, which is something that we know the money will go towards women and youth to make sure that they get back to work.
That commitment is deeply appreciated. This budget contains new taxes on big tech. What are the odds of some kind of a backlash from these powerful companies, similar to what we have seen in Australia or what Australia recently has experienced? And what are the government's plans to address that?
My sound didn't sound well. Can you repeat that?
Actually, yeah, sorry about that. Actually, it might have been actually on my end too. This budget contains new taxes on big tech. What are the odds on some kind of a backlash from these powerful companies, similar to that which Australia recently experienced? And what is the government's plan to address that? There often has been hesitation from government, knowing how powerful some of the big tech companies are and how much they are part of our daily business, to apply different measures to them. What are your thoughts on this topic?
That's a very specific question, and I need more time to be able to answer this very important question that has been shared, but I can tell you maybe it'll answer part of your question. We are investing, of course, presenting, a new luxury tax in this budget. We're also continuing to tackle tax evasion through this budget 2021, because we want, to make sure that we have a fair tax system where everyone pays their fair share. And we have made significant investments to strengthen the Canada Revenue Agency's ability to crack down on tax evasion and combat tax avoidance. So we are bringing more measures to strengthen that also. And I'll stay there, but I'll circle back with you to make sure that if there's other measures I can share with your participants, I will be able to share that with you soon.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much for addressing it. I was wondering about one more specific thing, and has to do with long-term care. We saw during COVID-19 how vulnerable the population living in long-term care are in Niagara and across the country. Is there anything more that the government is doing, or do you feel like governments need to do to address this particular area of those individuals that are our senior citizens that are living in long-term care facilities? Anything more that we need to do, or that your government is committed in doing?
Well, I think this crisis has shown how our long-term care system did not respond at all to support our elders. And we invested last year during the fall economic statement $1 billion to start and work with the province to make sure we fix the system. We will continue to do that. In the budget, we're investing another $3 billion, and we will work with the provinces and territories to have national long-term standards. That is something that we need to have, because we all know that this was part of the crisis that we should be ashamed of. And we need to work really, really hard to make sure that we protect our elders, and that we have a stronger system across the country. And I believe that both federal, provincial, and even, stakeholders will have to work closely together to get there.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that sometimes the crisis does make us aware of areas maybe we weren't previously aware of, how vulnerable we are there. And I think now for us moving forward is the actions that will tell the long-term story of this. Here's a question from Faye Perkins. She's one of our attendees today, and she was wondering, Minister Fortier, if you can speak more about education. There are many people in Niagara who are capable, but who do not have the skills for the new industries and technologies that are there. And if you can speak towards that part of it. And I actually agree with Faye that this is something that is of interest to the individuals, but is also of great interest to employers at the same time, is saying, like, how do we ensure that we support our workforce in the skills that they need moving forward?
Well, you're completely right. And as I said during my statement, we are investing in skills and in training, and it will support 500,000 Canadians through this program. We have to make sure we, of course, work with provinces and territories, our universities, colleges, and employers to make sure that we find the right approach to reskill or skill all of those that will be in the job sectors that will be available to them. So we will have to work together and get there very, very, very quickly, not wait. We have to be, making sure that we action this quickly.
If I can, Mishka, just be a bit, I'll just add a few extra details to Mona's comments. In the budget, we're proposing $118 million over 2 years, starting in 21-22, for Employment and Social Development Canada to conduct a 2-year pilot expansion of federal governments in after-school programming. Second to that, we're also investing $239 million in the Student Work Placement Program for 21-22. We're also investing $109 million for the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy, as Mona mentioned. And these specifically targeting vulnerable youth facing multiple barriers. We're also investing $960 million over 3 years to Employment and Social Development Canada for a new sectorial workforce solutions program, as well as $470 million over 3 years to Employment and Social Development Canada to establish a new apprenticeship program. And then finally, Mishka, we're looking at $298 million over 3 years for new skills for Success program. So we're adding a lot into that, but also into hiring programs for eligible employers that continue to experience qualifying declines in revenues relative to before the pandemic, and especially as it relates to their workforce declining. So we're trying to cover all our bases with the investments that we're making, because we do understand, both from the past as well as the present, that there's some challenges with respect to our workforce.
Yeah. Thank you so very much, actually, to both of you, actually, for commenting on it. I'm conscious of the time.
Just to say, I think it's critical, because we need to move fast on this. I think that Vance listed all of those investments, and I know that in your region, a lot of workers were affected, and the businesses will need to have support. So we'll have to really work together to make sure that the next three years in recovery measures, we act to reskill and skill our workers.
And I wanted to say this, I really do support your commitment to the urgency of it too. Because businesses often don't have the luxury of time and saying it's all right if it comes into play in a year or 2 years from now. Their matters are now, and because they're pressed and faced with a situation similar to what they've never seen in beforehand. I'm looking at the time and your time, everyone's time here on this call, and we are about 3 minutes before 10 o'clock. Minister Fortier, could I ask you maybe for a minute of closing comments, and then I'm going to pass it on to Chris.
Oh, I'll be shorter than that. I just want to thank you for having me today, and I'm sure we could continue this conversation. And Mishka, with your leadership, I know that if other of your participants or your members have questions, we're there to answer them. Chris, Vance, and myself, that's part of our job. So please don't hesitate to do so. And thank you again for having me today to share Budget 2021.
Thank you so very much, Minister Fortier, for being with us today. We truly appreciate it. I also wanted to express my thanks to Nordstrom Biotech for their partnership in making this possible. This webinar has been recorded and will be available on our site and to all participants. And on that note, offering closing comments is Mr. Chris Bittle, Member of Parliament for St. Catharines, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mishka. And I apologize to anyone if they hear screaming in the background. Everything's okay. It's just a unwelcome diaper change by my 2-year-old daughter. So there's some protests going on. So it has nothing to do with the budget, I assure you. I want to thank Mona for taking this opportunity, and I guess build on her comments that the conversation doesn't end today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Vance or I in our offices, and though it's virtual, we're happy to meet at any point. And I too would also like to thank Norgen Biotech. Had a relationship with them before my entry into politics, and it's great to see them growing and supporting this. And so don't hesitate to reach out. There's lots of programs to discuss, and lots of opportunities for Niagara businesses and individuals in Niagara. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for joining us. And a colleague of mine at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce always ends the calls by saying, stay positive and test negative. Seems somehow appropriate during these times. And I wish you all to stay safe. Thank you for being with us this morning.